Story 1. Better to look poor and be rich. Forget keeping up with the Joneses. As a teenager, I worked at a car dealership detailing the cars before the new owners would pick them up. I always loved watching the salesmen underestimate the old farmers who would come in wearing bib overalls, looking like they just got off the tractor, only to turn around and eagerly assist them when they selected a vehicle and paid for it in cash. Story 2. I used to make decisions on car loan applications and review portfolio performance. I remember one case where a husband and wife with a memorable to me last name were applying for a new GMC Yukon Denali, which was priced between $75,000 or $80,000 at the time. He had a good income while she was a stay-at-home mom. They had a nice address in a nice neighborhood but had no money down, no savings balance, substantial credit card debt, a large mortgage, and an open BMW lease. We declined the request by requiring some money down. They did not end up getting the loan through the source I worked for. By chance, they appeared shortly thereafter on my Facebook feed as a friend of a friend. It was a country club scene, she was dripping in jewelry, and the kids were decked out in designer labels. Fast forward 5 years. I see another application for a used minivan with the same name. It was them. Just out of bankruptcy, house foreclosed, BMW lease done. Now with a rental address. He has the same job and she now works too. They had amassed over $100,000 in credit card debt and the loan on the Yukon they obtained from another lender, which was included in the bankruptcy. Now with deeply subprime credit scores. I gave the application to a coworker because I knew who they were and couldn't really make a decision blindly. He wrote an approval at close to a 20% interest rate with money down required. We didn't get the loan that time either. Story 3. I have a friend with a $60,000 truck that doesn't drive anywhere because gas is too expensive. He is spending like $100 a week for his 20-minute commute. He is foolish. Conversely, I drive a 2015 Versa, and everyone thinks I am dirt poor. But the thing is paid for and runs great. Story 4. When they are obsessed with money talk, how to make money, how someone could afford something. I know someone who constantly tells everyone how much they bought something for, to insinuate that it is expensive and to prove they can afford it. Why always state the price? Comes off as so tacky and unnecessary. Story 5. Go to the parking lot of any U.S. Army infantry, armor, or artillery battalion. The junior enlisted soldiers and second lieutenants will be driving brand new Chargers, Mustangs, or Camaros financed at 26%, while the battalion commander will drive a 15-year-old Accord, Camry, or Civic. At real job workplaces, it's $100,000 Teslas, F-150S, or Audis being driven by people renting a poor quality apartment and not even maximizing their company match for their 401k. Story 6. Texans have a term for people like this. All hat, no cattle. The more someone wants you to look at the flashy thing they have, hoping you'll be impressed by it, the less they have behind it. Real wealth projects a sort of understated confidence. Look for the person who treats sudden financial shocks, like the water heater dying or needing a major car repair that's not covered by insurance, as little more than an annoyance. Anyone who's living one missed paycheck away from disaster will have a very different reaction. Story 7. I know someone who goes on cruises and buys designer clothes and items but is $20,000 in debt. She is constantly asking her dad to pay for things. She is 47 with a well-paying job but is so far in debt because it is a status thing. She does not even shop at Walmart. Story 8. Mismatched gaudy clothes with giant brand logos. They can't style clothing to save their lives. Plastic accessories that look cheap. Poorly performed or botched plastic surgery and badly tattooed eyebrows. Story 9. My ex-husband grew up poor, and it gave him a horrible complex. It was so important for him to look rich, and we went so far in debt. He drove a Porsche, I had a 14-year-old car, had to have designer clothes, and got mad because I didn't have a closet of designer shoes and clothes myself. When I was pregnant with our daughter, I had saved around $10,000 to help pay bills, so I wouldn't have to rush back to work after 6 weeks. Know what he did? He took a chunk of that money and bought an Omega Seamaster watch because he felt he deserved it. That should have been when I walked, but I stuck around another decade. He always tried to blag an upgrade on flights and, of course, had to pay for entry to airport lounges. He would take a lot of photos to share on social media. But it wasn't enough to post for the sake of gloating. No, he had to find fault and talk about how standards were slipping or that it was simply not good enough, whilst tagging the airline in hopes of compensation of some kind. I couldn't take it anymore. It was such an embarrassment, and I hated the debt and struggling to pay our bills to fund his faux-rich lifestyle. Filed for divorce and wished I would have done it sooner. Story 10. A coworker of mine has three $1,500 expensive handguns, a few $1,000 high-end assault rifles, plus a few other firearms. As a competition shooter, I would love to see his guns and how well he shoots. Every time I invited him to the range with me, he said ammunition was too expensive, and he doesn't have any ammunition at home. Story 11. Brand new, giant, jacked-up trucks with 8 headlights on the front that have never seen a day off-road or had any kind of farm equipment in the back. I call them cowboy cosplayers, typically seen in North America. Story 12. Driving a brand new SUV with a $1,200 monthly payment that you can't afford, and it's about to be repossessed, so you park it somewhere else to hide it from the tow truck that has been circling your block for the past few weeks. Story 13. When I used to work at the place I was let go from, not my fault, there was an employee that made 17 Canadian dollars an hour driving a Mercedes not brand new. He acted like he was all-powerful and above me, even though I was his boss. About 8 months later, everyone had enough of his bragging and just stopped talking to him. What they didn't see is this guy would constantly ask for his pay early because of his bills. Eventually, we terminated him for a lot of reasons, but it's just funny when you see something like this, but you know the real story behind it. Story 14. In my middle-class neighborhood, I can always tell when someone is new to credit. They buy an overpriced house. Then, a new SUV for the wife shows up, followed by a new truck for the husband. Then, right before things go sideways, a new boat is parked in the driveway. But then they need a camper, all new. And then the couple splits up over financial problems. Rinse and repeat. Story 15. In South Africa, people own BMW, Audi, Mercedes, and similar brands to show off, but they can barely afford it. Sure, they can make the monthly payments, but not the balloon payment at the end of the lease period. They live in rented flats, and the car is worth more than the property. If they ever invite you to their home, they have no furniture. It's ridiculous how crazy their approach to life is, just because they want validation for having a nice car. Story 16. Probably still enough dollars for a normal citizen, but a Chanel bag and sunglasses, and what I'm certain is Tom Ford's electric cherry perfume, riding the public bus. I am describing a lady who is sitting right in front of me right now, laughing out loud. Story 17. The vast majority of people who live in really nice houses and drive expensive pickups or SUVs. Most people are about a missed paycheck away from losing everything because they have stretched themselves so thin. Story 18. I drive past a house on my way to work every day that has had a tarp on the roof and rotting siding for the last 4 to 5 years. About a year ago, a decked-out Grand Wagoneer showed up in the driveway. That car is at least $100,000. And yet the house continues to fall apart around it. I just don't get some people's priorities. Story 19. I saw a woman explain to young ladies to beware of influencers who try to pretend they get their life financed by others simply for being pretty. She said in her experience, such influencers are either actually broke or engaged in sex work. And reading testimonies of yacht girls adds onto this. So, if you ever see an influencer that brags about individuals paying her rent, keep that in mind. There's no world in which a woman gets everything paid simply because she's pretty. Story 20. Leasing a car above your pay grade and wearing luxury clothes that market to people who are mostly too poor to afford luxury clothes. Louis Vuitton handbags come to mind. Paying 50% of your salary for a car lease is idiotic.